Michael Rezendes, thank you very much for being with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So you're a Pulitzer Award-winning journalist. You're specialized in investigative
That's correct,
journalism.
yes.
You did that famous Spotlight investigation on pedophilia. There was a movie based on your story. You're, we can say, a star of journalism. I wanted to ask you something. Did online journalism and social media and all this 2.0 revolution change things? Of course they changed things, but did it change it for better or for worse in what concerns your type of journalism you make?
Well, in my experience, it's a double-edged sword because the internet has given us a lot of new tools to do our job, especially investigative reporting. We have so much access to information that we've never had before. We can get court documents, police documents, all manner of information just sitting at our desks that used to take days or even weeks to collect before the age of the internet. On the other hand, the internet has literally destroyed the revenue model for news organizations. And so newspapers like the Boston Globe are having a really hard time surviving in the current environment. You know, we need a new revenue model, and we haven't really found one yet.
I don't know if you've seen that parody John Oliver did about Spotlight. Have you seen it?
I have not. I've heard about it, but I have not seen it. I heard it's quite good, but I haven't seen it.
Basically what it says is that media outlets today, they are investing less in good quality journalism and more in silly stuff that can become viral so they can generate clicks. Do you think it's an accurate vision?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think there are a lot of so-called news websites that are more interested in clicks than they are in providing quality journalism. I hope it's just a phase we're going through. I hope it's an evolutionary phase, and then eventually this shakes out to a situation where we are getting more quality news through new media.
Right, and now tell me a bit about the pedophilia investigation. Was it a hard one? Was it hard times for you, for the team? How did it go? How did you manage to break that cover up and get to the real story?
Well, it was a difficult investigation. First of all, it was more work than I ever imagined. It was also a very long investigation. If you've seen the movie,
I have.
So what you see in the movie, it's a 5-month investigation that leads up to the publication of our first story. But what you don't see in the movie is that we continued to investigate the Catholic Church, and we published another 600 stories over the course of a year. We also wrote a book about what we found in our reporting in the middle of that. So we worked very, very hard. I would say the investigation into the Catholic Church really consumed probably 2 years of my life. And I think all of us on the Spotlight team paid a price. I think the people who were close to us also paid a price. And I have to say that listening to scores of people tell us stories about how their lives were ruined by being sexually abused by people they trusted, which were the Catholic priests in their neighborhood, was really devastating to hear. So in that sense, it was a difficult investigation.
And you talk now about the price to pay. You said yesterday that you're still a Catholic, you still believe in the Catholic faith, but you stopped going to church and you're looking for new ways of exercising your faith. Was that the price you paid?
Well, yes. I mean, I would not characterize myself as a Catholic today. I felt that I was during the investigation. But I think, although I'm still a man of faith and a believer in God, I really lost my faith in the Catholic Church as a result of this investigation.
In the church or in the people of the church?
Well, in the institution of the church. And I have to say that the fact that the Vatican has done very little about this issue in the last 15 years has done nothing to restore my faith in the institution.
Even Pope Francis?
Pope Francis has said many nice things about doing something about this issue, but I've yet to see anything of substance. Pope Francis appointed a commission to study the issue of clergy sex abuse, but it's almost 3 years later, and there have been no findings, there have been no recommendations. Pope Francis also announced there would be a tribunal to hold bishops accountable, bishops who cover up for priests who sexually abuse children. And recently, Pope Francis announced there will be no tribunal. Instead, he said he has made some changes to canon law, which will make it easier to discipline bishops. And I think that may be true, and it may not be true. But I think a lot of the survivors of clergy sex abuse believe it's backpedaling and amounts to a broken promise.
Okay, now let's talk a bit about the film. How was the experience to have a crew from Hollywood company, to have stars like Mark Ruffalo, who did your role, studying the way you work and then enacting all that investigation?
Well, a lot of it was great fun. It was very instructive. I learned a lot about how movies are made and how movies are promoted. And Mark and I became very good friends. We discovered that we really have a lot in common. Mark and I both come from similar backgrounds. We have similar, Mark is half Italian, half French Canadian. I'm half Portuguese, half French Canadian. We even have the same initials. We like the same books, so Mark is very politically active, so we spent a lot of time talking about politics. So it was really a pleasure to get to know Mark. I thought he did a great job portraying me. Everybody I know says he completely nailed me. So that was really a lot of fun. It wasn't all a bed of roses. I mean, as I said before, this was a difficult investigation. It was a difficult time of my life, and it was not always pleasant to have to travel back in time and relive those years. But overall, it was an extremely positive experience, and I give a lot of credit to the actors and also particularly to the director, Tom McCarthy, and the screenwriter, Josh Singer. They were really committed to creating something very, very authentic, something that really replicated the Boston Globe, our investigation, and the work that we do. I think they were very committed to making a movie about the importance of journalism at a time when journalism is really in a state of crisis. And I think they succeeded very, very admirably.
Now, talking about journalism being in a state of crisis, the Oxford Dictionary elected post-truth as the word for 2016. Do you believe in post-truth? Do you think it's a real concept?
Well, I think today we have a situation where people believe that they're entitled to their own facts. And I think that's very, very troubling. People hang on to their separate versions of reality. And there seems to be, at times, very little consensus about what is true and what is not true. And I think it makes it very hard to have a meaningful debate about public issues. I think it makes it very, very difficult to have a society that can unite around a particular issue. I think there is something to the idea that we're in a new era. I think a lot of it's attributable to the internet and what is put out on the internet. People can find stories to back up their ideological or cultural points of view without paying much attention to whether those stories are accurate or not. And I think that's a problem.
And do you think fake news did have an impact on Donald Trump's election?
Of course it did. There's no question about it. But as Donald Trump has said, fake news goes both ways. I mean, you can find stories on both sides of the ideological divide in America that are less than credible. But I do think fake news was a factor.
And now that you talk about fake news going both ways, do you think CNN did well in giving the details of that supposed KGB or FSB report on Donald Trump's adventures in Moscow, which are not certain? Apparently, it was based on just on what someone said.
Well, I had more of a problem with what BuzzFeed published, and I have a problem with the explanation that BuzzFeed gave. BuzzFeed said it was impossible for them to corroborate the information in this document that they published, and they would leave it up to the readers to decide. And I think that's an evasion of a good journalist's responsibility. I think journalists should not be stenographers. The job of a journalist is to determine what is accurate and what is not accurate, and what is true and what is not true, and present those things that are accurate and true to readers or viewers and listeners. I think to say, well, we're just going to put this out there because we'll get a lot of clicks and let the readers decide whether it's true or not without giving the readers any guidance, I think is an evasion of journalists' responsibility.
Okay, one final question. What advice would you give to a young journalist who wants to pursue investigative journalism and wants to find the truth and defeat all the cover-ups that are put up by the powerful?
Yes. Well, I do speak to a lot of journalism students these days, and I am very honest with them. I tell them it's harder to make a living in this profession than it ever has been before, or certainly in my lifetime. On the other hand, I also tell them that if they are passionate about this profession, and if they really do want to make the world a better place, and if they really want to create change, then being a journalist is a very, very good profession.
But it's hard.
Yes, it's hard.
And do you think it will be harder with Trump?
Well, in a way I would say no, because I think with Trump we're going to be very, very busy. I think we're going to have a lot to write about.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the interview.
Sure, my pleasure, yeah.